the word relief. In the 70s, there was a major project in the southern and central part of this district that's on your map right now, all related to us taking over the Buyer Dam. That's just to the right of this area up there and within the ACM property, because that dam was causing, when water was backing up behind that dam, it would back up into the neighborhoods. There were sewer issues in the neighborhoods. A lot worse things were going on back in the 60s and 70s in this area than have gone on recently, but clearly the lifespan of what got put in and the capacity of it is being somewhat affected. And obviously we had a, kind of biblical flood of 500-year storm, is what the information says. So anyway, the point is to take a look at this and put some estimates together to say, what would it cost to make it this much better? What would it cost to make it this much better? And give you an idea of what we call, I think you've heard the words level of service when you've talked about asset management for roads and water mains and so forth. And so it's the same thing with stormwater. If we say, I don't ever want to see any water standing in my yard ever, no matter how hard it rains, we can all understand that's going to be really expensive. If we want to say, I don't want to see any intersection flooded unless it's a storm like this 500-year storm, but I don't want to see the whole street flooded doorstep to doorstep, which is what we saw in this rain, again, in southern West Willow, and we've got photos from throughout this neighborhood, and we all know there were a lot of cars that were totaled just because that water got to 2.5, 3, 4 feet deep in some of the streets there. So what would it take to make it so you don't have that even in a big flood? Maybe that's too expensive, but how can we at least understand what do you get for an investment? You also can't go and ask for grants unless you know how much money you need and what you're going to spend it on. So the primary purpose is to be able to identify what's going on and what would it take to solve it, but hand in hand is, and how do we explain this to someone? Because I think from an eligibility standpoint, when you look at the County Opportunity Index, or even I think some parts of this might be in the federal, but they've got another thing called the Vulnerability Index that is a little more associated with hazards, particularly weather-related hazards. And I think there are some opportunities for eligibility, maybe not for just filling out a grant proposal and submitting it, maybe for more like an earmark from the congressional delegation or whatever. But we've got to know what we're asking for with not a great deal of specificity, but we have to be able to say we've got a mile of pipes we need to make bigger, and we've got to dig 2 ponds, and it costs this much. And it is a fairly expensive study to get to that point. I would expect that each of these are in the neighborhood of, maybe not $250,000, but approaching that. The benefit of doing the study work, particularly in the West Willow neighborhood, is for us to do a decent study, partly because the records are not in great shape at the road commission level over in West Willow. We would also get a better understanding of how does that system in West Willow function, and we would also have all those pipes and structures in the West Willow neighborhood cleaned. We came into this area in 2017 and 18 after we got a grant for asset management work. So we TV'd just about all, I'm going to say all the pipes, but I'm going to better off saying just about all the pipes in this blue area that are ours. We TV'd all those, and the guys went in. We TV'd those in 2016 and early 17, and the guys went in 18 and 19 and repaired 200 or 300 structures and did some additional cleaning where we had just a couple of areas where it looked like it was hard to get debris out of the pipe or the TV cameras couldn't get through. So this area has actually had some minor rehabilitation work, but none of that really improved the ability to move water or to prevent flooding. All it did was, help the system function as best it can. And I'll just say in the 20s, 30s, and even in the 70s, when there was a major overhaul, the design standards were not what they are today, knowing that there's more rain. So I'll leave it there if there's any questions. It's kind of a general overview.
Comments or questions?
Okay.
Trustee Swanson?
So thank you for coming and talking to us about this. I
Yep.
appreciate it. And then maybe the first one is quite a question. I'm wondering about how we use whatever we're able to do and learn from this to approach thinking about other neighborhoods, because this isn't the only this may be one that's impacted heavily, but we have plenty of neighborhoods in our older neighborhoods where what you're discussing impacts them. Maybe it just didn't reach that level. So I'm wondering if you see a way for us to, if we do a study like this in one area, that we would learn things, because obviously it's going to be different. I know every area is not the same,
Yep.
but things that we would learn about the process that would help us so that we could be thinking about how to approach this at a wider scale at some point in time, because you don't want to, it'd be better to address things in a preventative way than to be reactionary after the flooding and all the hardship that happened to people happens.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. At the same time, one of the things I recommended for the county's climate action plan was to have something that the feds call a vulnerability assessment. And I was really thinking about maybe not exclusively, the east side of the county, but that's the most urbanized area where we've got older development, and we've also got, opportunity index. And the vulnerability tag from the feds is not just about what's the socioeconomic makeup of folks in the neighborhood, but it also says what happens when there's a disaster? You need to find a way to get bottled water, maybe. You need to be able to have the resources to get to the store and get, if you're farther from a store, if you don't have access to the things that you need to recover from an emergency, then, what's the situation? So I'd like to be able to do something like that on a broader scale. That there's a couple other areas of the county that we'd want to look at too in that sense. But same thing here. But we could do that. We could do a study like this for any neighborhood, whether we've got drainage infrastructure there or not. So I think one of the things that is a potential outcome for the southern West Willow, for example, is that's currently all road commission. It could stay road commission, depending on what we find, what the study says, and how much better would it be, how much better does it function after cleaning. But it also could be added to the existing county drain. So in any neighborhood, you could petition us, just like these forms are, to do the initial study. There's no obligation to spend money and make improvements afterwards. The study is just to put the information in front of you so you can make an informed decision on what's the benefit of this investment? How much better can we make it in this particular neighborhood? How bad was it in this neighborhood? You do want to try to have equity, right, between different neighborhoods. The benefit of the newer neighborhoods is they're constructed to a very different standard. And honestly, we don't get so many calls from those. But I think you're on point because in 2021, there was a big storm too, and a lot of flooding and, basement backups too. Luke's familiar with this. We've traded notes. When I looked at the list of addresses from 2021 to 2023, there were like 5 common addresses on Yucca's and maybe 8 on ours, or vice versa. The point is, where it rained hard and it was an old neighborhood, there was a problem. So right to your point, we're just waiting until another older neighborhood gets hit with a hard rain, because when they were built, they were trying to move the water along, but they didn't consider any of the storage. And now the pipes are a little bit bigger because it rains harder than they used to be, and the storage is the number one idea. Don't just pass it on downstream to somebody else. Although I would say part of making this recommendation, particularly for the neighborhood in blue here, is seeing that there are some township-owned parcels that are pretty ideally located for if you did want to add storage in the neighborhood. I'm not saying I know the answer now, but we've seen this play out in a lot of different communities. And the bottom line is you have to add storage in the neighborhoods, or you're really not going to be able to solve their issues. So I would expect that digging some holes in the ground is going to be part of the recommendations. Can you cover them up with dirt and make it underground storage? If you want to play 2 or 3 times as much, yes, you can. If you want to have an open pond and maybe make it a park water feature, that's an option that you can pay a little bit more to make it look a little nicer, but it's not as much as, it doesn't cost as much more as putting it underground. These are all things we can talk about later. But yeah, going in any of the older neighborhoods that don't have stormwater ponds, and even looking, we're doing a study right now in some of the developments that were 90s, 2000s, and current. We're kind of looking at 3 different design standards, and what we're looking at is how are they performing, and more importantly, we only started requiring infiltration in 2014, but I know there are ponds out there that do infiltrate. They just didn't get credit for it. They still had to dig a hole for storage. Some of these ponds don't hold much water, and some of these ponds aren't doing what they were supposed to do at original design. We want to find the most cost-effective way we've found in other areas is trying to squeeze more blood out of the turnip. Where we're already requiring water to be stored, could we store more water there? Can we get it there? If we can, it's going to be a lot cheaper and more cost-effective to do. Not much of an option in this neighborhood, but there may be other neighborhoods where we can provide relief, maybe by optimizing some of these private ponds or some of the HOA ponds that we have jurisdiction over. And we haven't done a lot of that study work in Ypsilanti Township because we're piling it in a couple of other communities, but we've got our eye on, moving to that stage next.
So the blue area is the neighborhood that's identified, or is that everything that's in the buyer drain area?
So this is the buyer relief drain. This is one of 2 neighborhoods that we would look at. I think there's probably, if we scroll down, you'll see another map for what we call the Ypsi Township number 1 drain that covers the southern half of West Willow. If not, I've got it in my pocket. Because the southern half of West Willow, there we go, actually drains to Ford Lake. It takes a while to get there, and it has to cross the freeway, and I can't predict the outcome of this. I'm pretty sure the water has a hard time getting across the freeway. I've seen the pipes and the size of pipes, and I think that's part of the problem. We didn't have problems or issues in that Sugarbrook neighborhood that were unusual. I think there was some of the nuisance flooding. Yes, this intersection was affected, but I didn't hear about or see photos of the streets are doorstep to doorstep like we saw in these other neighborhoods. I think some of that is because the drainage pipes are deeper in the Sugarbrook neighborhood, but we'll have a public meeting separate for each of these if we go forward with this, and we'll let people tell us what they saw, because what we find is we know a lot about how to come up with the solutions, but the people in the neighborhood know what the problems are. And a lot of times they've actually got an idea or 2 that have been kicked around for a while, or maybe 30 years ago somebody was in talking to them and said, well, what if you did this? And it didn't move forward. And some people remember that, and it might be something that we haven't caught. So we would certainly have separate public process in each of these drainage districts, and I'm just going to say to us, those 2 drainage districts are neighborhoods, even though I know, like Township Neighborhood Watch, you're talking about 3 or 4 neighborhood watch units in each of these drainage districts, and we'll work with you to figure out, if we go forward, well, what's the best way to get those people together? All together, separate chunks, we'll do it however makes sense process-wise for the township to make sure everybody gets a chance to tell us what they saw and heard, because even if we don't get out there for a few more months, people are going to be eager to tell us what they remember about what they saw and heard.
We had a gentleman tell us that the Galt Village Neighborhood Watch, that he lived on Grove in, I think one of the apartment complexes along Grove, that he had severe flooding when this happened. So, that's not that far from Sugarbrook, so I don't know if that's related or not. He also said that, I don't think he reported it to Yucca or however they report things, because he just, I don't know why, because Brendan and people were telling everybody at that meeting, and this is just not that long ago, I want to say like 2 meetings ago, to report it anyway, just so that the data's there. And so there's something along there, because it was the same storm that caused this particular gentleman. We could probably find out where it was, because I remember who he is. And then one other thing I wondered about, is there anybody else, because this is the last one right here. Anybody else want to, or should I just ask the next one? So the other thing I wondered about, Evan, is I'm guessing this area over here is like that State Street area. Am I right on the map, that open area right there?
Or no, that's Wired. Sorry, State is another half mile to the right. So State Street is
there's two states.
I'm talking about like the area where we're hoping that, yeah, the redevelopment zone. Is that area right there that I'm thinking about right there? Yeah, that's where I'm talking, that's what I'm talking about right there. So, I mean, it's our hope that we help redevelop that area in a way that's good for business and other things. So when this study happens, or when you're thinking about it, it's going to be important to be thinking about like what happens when that area or when that develops. Like we want to be thinking forward on that, because we don't want to do something here that's going to make that harder or vice versa. I mean, if there's a way to, it'd just be better to be thinking about that all along, I guess. Is that going to factor into it at all, or are we just talking about the neighborhood?
We're just talking about the neighborhood partly because the other blue lines, the dark blue lines that you see to the right of the shaded area, that's where water would end up going for developments, kind of, and that is State Street where that dark blue line goes left to right, right? Or is that Tyler? Yeah. No, that's State. Tyler's to the north, right? So that's State Street down here.
So are you thinking because that would be new, or maybe that's already got better infrastructure, that's not going to be impacted by development and the needs for water?
So the shaded area
Drainage, I guess, would be the
shaded area is really a little sub-watershed. So if a drop of rain hits to the right of the shaded area, it's going to head right towards the Willow Run Creek, and it's probably going to find its way into either our pipe that's along State Street, or the road commission's got some pipe along Tyler Road. So essentially Wired is sort of a dividing line for which direction the water's going to go when it rains. So any development to the east of Wired is not going to affect these neighborhoods here. And as you know, the township and really every other municipality in the county has done since, the township's been doing this since at least the 90s. You require our office to review to make sure that the new development doesn't affect any of the neighbors, whether they already had a problem or not. And so the new development is going to provide, better protection than anything up through 2014.
Okay.
Particularly for the neighbors.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Trustee Peterson?
Thank you. Sir, my colleague's going to try to bring it up. My computer's not with it. But are you doing a study on West Willow? I can't read that map.
All of West Willow will be studied in this. So the northern half of West Willow is within that other shaded area, what we call the Buyer Drainage District. Okay. And then this one covers the southern half of West Willow. So I'll just point real quick. So here's the 94, US 12. So here's your West Willow neighborhood. Okay. And this is the southern half that I'm saying wants to go to Fort Lake. And then this is the northern half of West Willow that's going to come, over into Willow Run ultimately.
Okay, so when would this project start, sir? In spring or when? When would you start doing the studies?
Yeah, we would start doing the study as soon as authorized by the township. We've talked with OHM about the desired scope of work. We've asked them to work up, cost estimates for, what would it take to do that desired scope of work. So we can start as soon as the township is ready for us. We probably wouldn't go talk to the neighbors first. Usually we like to get some preliminary information together so we're better equipped to answer questions about the what and the why, but we wouldn't go to the neighbors too far into the program, because for stuff like this, I don't really like to walk into a room and start with a 45-minute presentation about all the stuff we know. My feeling is you got a bunch of frustrated people. They've had, this isn't the first time anybody who had a flooding problem has ever had a flooding problem. Almost everybody we've heard from is like, well, this happens, every other year or fairly often. It doesn't just happen when we have the big rains. So we would look to have the type of public meeting where if you show up 10 minutes before the meeting, we just sit you down with a Sharpie and you draw what happened on your property. And if you saw something over here because you were driving to the store, draw that. Tell us, was it 2 feet deep? Was it 3 feet? Because ultimately, we have engineers do computer models, but ultimately, if we can get some crowdsourcing from, let's say, 50 people give us input in an area that size, we can compare that to our model, and we found in other situations that that information is a lot more useful in double checking what the computer model is. Everybody thinks a computer is, if you get an answer from a computer, it's exactly that answer, and I've found that's not quite how the world works, especially when you're modeling things. If the things you assumed are perfectly correct, then yes, that answer will be right, but there's so many assumptions when you're trying to model really anything, whether it's rain or whether or not this car is going to, work like this aerodynamically or what have you. There's still a lot of real world that comes into play that you make assumptions and, you try to get as close as you can, but you don't want to assume that it's perfect. A model's a good decision-making tool, and we want to be able to provide recommendations to make the best decision on input that's been, ground truthed by people who live there.
Okay, so after you do your studies and you get all your results, where do they go from there? What corrections, if needed, for these people in the neighborhood to save their homes, what corrections will you do then?
Yeah, that's it. So that's
you start a whole pipeline? Do you try to unblock the system? What is the result?
Yeah, so these are large areas and they're complicated. I can't tell you what the outcome is going to be here, but we're going to come back and say, okay, it looks like, these are the major problems, and here's usually for areas this large, there's some options that can be, combined to get a better and better outcome. But typically, again, for a neighborhood that doesn't have any stormwater ponds, typically you're not going to move the needle, and it's not going to be worth spending any money if you're adding some stormwater storage. So can we find a place to store additional water, whether usually it needs to be within the neighborhood, sometimes it can be nearby. So probably some additional storage. And it wouldn't surprise me that we might find some what I call pinch points in the pipes. Maybe you don't need to replace if there's 2 miles of pipe in West Willow, maybe you don't need to replace 2 miles, but maybe there's 300 feet in a couple of spots that, boy, if you replace those, it doesn't solve all the problems, but it's really cost effective to make that little improvement so that your bigger improvements have more bang for your buck, if you will. So I wouldn't expect having to replace all the pipes. It'd probably be more storage and then clearing up, pinch points, or maybe placing a parallel pipe in along one particular street that floods a lot would be the type of things that you'd see. But honestly, I can't sit here and say exactly what. Probably the biggest factor for the other neighborhood to the north, again, we call it biorelief, is what I see in our files is the reason our office has a dam that Henry Ford built next to West Willow is because it was causing problems with water backing up, and GM liked to store water there for fire protection or something, I don't know what, but when we took that dam over, the intent was to never have water back up behind the dam other than when it was raining. Essentially, the neighborhood storage has been next to GM since 1980 for this area. It's difficult to keep that dam functioning that way. We found we have to spend anywhere between $30,000 and $75,000 in a given year just to be able to clear it out behind the dam. A lot of dirt and big logs, big trees, old ash trees seem to come every year, no matter if we clear out 100 dead trees that plug up. There's a little hole at the bottom of each dam. This one is only 2 feet diameter and it drains 4 square miles. So the water backs up quite a bit when it rains. Is that dam actually having a material effect in a small, medium, or large storm? I don't know, but I know on the records, the reason we took over that dam was to try to make it so you never had water behind it because of the problems that backed up into, again, the more northerly neighborhood, not so much the southern part of West Willow. So long answer to an easy question.
I have one more little question. Over on Textile, there's a pond. And I know some residents had complained like last year and early spring. When that pond gets high, it's low now, it drains across the street and it doesn't go down the drain properly. So it's ruining beautiful yards who have been there for a long time, where they can't cut their grass, they can't do certain things because it's sinking. And yeah, and that's kind of, and I don't know if you know Larry Doe's area, and I know he's called, but, I came and looked at it, he took me on a tour, and is that one of the areas that we could address, that that drainage drains off right for those people in those homes on that street?
Yes. So there is a county drain that didn't provide relief to that area, but at one time there was a road commission culvert that connected into the county drain that was providing relief. For whatever reason, that culvert totally disintegrated. The road commission couldn't find it again. They did put in an overflow culvert, but we've spoken with the road commission and said, that's higher than what the historic level was. We've provided them additional information to put in a lower relief pipe that would still be legal to do, just to match, what was there before. And I think they're still waiting for they're still trying to find the time frame to put that in, but they have committed to putting in an even lower relief pipe. But as of today, they feel like their road is wholly protected. But we've said, well, look, here's the information from where the prior culvert was and some information your field staff compiled and shared with us that I think maybe didn't make it up the chain when they changed operations managers a year or two ago and all that. So absolutely, that one is on target to repair. And again, it's been partially repaired. We just feel like that's not quite up to what was expected and what the residents previously had for level of service, like we talked about.
Great, thank you.
Other question?
Yes, I have.
Trustee Newman?
Apologize for my tardiness. And to just get a clear understanding, the relief that you're going to provide to the neighborhood, the area, will not alleviate flooding, but it will minimize flooding or water buildup or?
For this area that we're talking about here, right?
Yes.
We're back up here. So we'll provide recommendations of things you could do to provide, tangible relief, to make it better, to make it so, there's going to be an option in there that says if you really don't want to see water on the street, unless we have a huge storm like this, and you still want to see even less water in the street than we did, you want people to be able to drive to get out of their house if they need to, we'll be able to identify how much relief are we providing to people if you have this much investment. If you invest more, how much better is that relief? And that'll be the tough part, right? Looking at that and kind of trying to take that abstract, well, how often is it going to happen that it's this bad? And be able to say that's a lot of money. I mean, it will be a lot of money. Mm-hmm. The one catch that I didn't mention that I intended to when Trustee Peterson spoke is the basements are not connected to the stormwater system. So any basement backups due to sewage and whatnot, those would not be addressed with this study that we're doing. That would be a separate issue relative to the sanitary sewer system. We have spoken with YCUA. They have some ideas of what they might be able to offer to people as optional, but I'm not going to speak for what YCUA's got. But I do want to be very clear that this deals with rain that hits the ground and doesn't get out of the way soon enough, and that could be helpful for people, but I think we recognize that there's a certain number of people that are a lot less interested in whether the road's flooded than whether their basement is flooded. And actually, a good friend of mine, Valencia Mobley, is Detroit Water and Sewer Department. She's the head of it, and she often speaks with residents who are frustrated about street flooding, and her standard answer, because there's only so much money, is better in the street than your basement. Their DWSD's focus is we don't want basement backups, because that is a lot more impactful to your life than a street. Again, I think the choices will be there later.
Thank you. And
yes.
Last question. How will you go about measuring not measuring, but figuring out where to put the corrections if it doesn't rain? If there's no rain to show. Yep. The backup.
Yeah, there's a standard process for modeling these things, but you typically do like to have rain gauges and flow monitors. So the rain gauges will tell you how much did it rain. The flow monitors will tell you what happened in these pipes. And you don't have to have the biblical flood to be able to make a prediction of what that would look like. There's standard information about how rain tends to fall where you can help yourself with the projections. But like I said, we're going to have residents tell us what they experienced in this event, and we will do what they call calibrate the model to what people actually experienced so that we have a greater confidence level. you're kind of crystal balling a little bit of what does the giant storm look like. But the better information we get from people of, hey, if the apartment building had this backup over here, maybe that's totally unrelated to what was over there. But if the modelers know that when they're creating their model, then we've got a better idea. And the model will include the size of every single pipe, the length of it, the slope of it, all the things that affect how water moves around. And it will also factor in whatever information we got. Typically, the consultants like to see at least 3 months, but sometimes you go for more of rain gauges and flow meters. Those add a little bit of cost to a study, but they give you a greater comfort level that you've got a good decision-making tool. Again, your models are never perfect, but you want to have something that represents what goes on there as accurately as you can.
Yeah, because I heard you mention, making the corrections to the pipes or making adjustments to the pipes, and I was just kind of curious, without the rain, how would you know where those corrections should be?
Yeah, so absolutely, anytime you do these type of studies, whether it's in a sanitary sewer or in a storm drain, you're typically looking to see, we call it a system response. How much did it rain, and then what's the response? Sometimes not all the rain's getting in there. Sometimes it also gives you the opportunity to say, essentially you can change the pipe size. Well, what if we had a pipe that was twice as big? What would that look like? Would that solve the problem? So the model is actually the basis for then saying, well, now we're going to model, what if we did this? What if we did that? And typically for something as big as this, we might model 20 or 25 different alternatives before we come down to, here's 3 things that you could choose from and the pros and cons. And sometimes it's a little a la carte where you can take a couple of aspects of the medium and add them into the lower cost option if that is part of the service level. It doesn't mean those are the only options. It just means we're trying to give people a sense of, if you put in this much, you could get these benefits. But certainly if there's a feeling of like, well, this one particular area we really need to put a little extra love to, there's always options to adjust that too. So I don't think we ever want to come in and say, these are your only choices. It's like, this is where we're going to start the conversation. And again, the type of money it takes to address these issues, I'm pretty sure it won't be a one-meeting conversation, when it comes decision time.
All right, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Winters, you had something?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just want to mention to Evan, because I know he mentioned about the development that occurred in the 90s and 2000. Thereafter, Matt's in the audience tonight, too. The township did, we probably had about 30-plus development agreements on a number of subdivisions that specifically incorporate the requirements of retention and detention. In fact, you might recall that a year or two ago, there was a major flooding in the Huron Ridge, Huron Heights apartment complex. It was a township that actually utilized that development agreement to require the apartment owners at that time to go out there and, I don't know the right engineering term, but to dredge that detention pond that had not been cleaned out probably since the time it was actually built. And the point I'm making for Evan and the board is that perhaps those development agreements that we still have on file here might be of assistance to your team as you go through other subdivisions, because there are some requirements imposed upon those HOAs to maintain the operational.
Yep.
If they don't do that, the township is authorized to do that and assess accordingly, because we couldn't do anything much about what happened in the 50s and 60s.
Yep.
But the newer developments, we did try to get ahead of the curve and incorporate that into the development agreements. And you were actually here, I think, during some of those development agreements.
Yep.
Matt was too.
Yeah, the township has been way ahead of most communities, if not all communities in the county, with being on top of those development agreements, having legal counsel that gives you really good long-term advice. It's not just about making sure it gets built the right way, but it makes sure that you can keep it maintained the right way. Not just our stuff, but the landscaping. I mean, there's a number of things that the township has done to make sure that the site plan is still what was approved back 20 years ago. And I would say Huron Ridge is, I can't remember now if that's the first place I drove by when I was driving around on the 24th of August, but it was one of the first 2 or 3 places, if it wasn't the first one in. I think I came in from Superior because I was looking at something up there and drove through. And I mean, no standing water, no issue. I can't remember if I sent you both a photo, but I certainly noted that to the county as well, because obviously the county was helping house the residents who had to be moved out of those facilities due to the flooding. And I felt so good that what the township had done, what OHM had done to make sure that, it was restored back to the way it should be was great, because it had really degraded into something that didn't work out so good.
Thank you. Just to kind of recap, because we've said a lot.
Yes. That's what happens when you get me.
Well, no, I mean, I like this kind of information. Infrastructure is so important to any community, and as long as I've been here and prior to me being here, we've always invested in infrastructure. But these flooding events, I don't think, of course, no one could have predicted the way we had them. And the last storm that hovered over the Willow Run Airport in the Willow Run area, Canton actually got hit, Van Buren,
Yes.
Canton got hit really, really
Yes.
bad. But Chevrolet is one street that always floods. Mm-hmm. And part of the jurisdiction is under the Drain Commission. So what this action will do is put the Road Commission, maintenance of the storm drain, under the jurisdiction of the Drain Commission. Is that correct?
It'll provide you a pathway to do that. So approving this study doesn't transfer who is in ownership of it, but the recommendations you would get, we would be clear to say, at this level of investment would include taking over all the road commission, infrastructure in, whatever, include a picture in this area or that area or what have you. So we would be clear about whether or not that was accepted. And in fact, if that was the only thing you wanted to accomplish, was to just transfer the ownership, that could be a possible outcome too. That would probably be the Yugo of possible outcomes. And then you'd have the Chevrolet and the Ford and the Cadillac and the Escalade.
It's just hard to figure out when residents are calling. Do I call the Drain Commission for flooding? Do I call the Road Commission?
Yes.
Because there's 2 stormwater systems.
Yes.
Managed by 2 different county governments. And the Drain Commission responds very quickly.
Yeah. And you can sort of see what you're talking about, Brenda, if you just look at the shaded area here. So all the dark blue is my offices, but all these other streets are road commission.
Right.
Is this, like you say, Chevrolet is kind of like right in between, where we've got just a little bit, but not the part that people are having problems in. So,
Not the part that right in.
and I don't know what the issues are, but we'll certainly be able to find out.
And we have requested for years to have the storm system cleaned out, like the Drain Commission has done in the past. And the Road Commission just hasn't, for a number of reasons, and I'm not sure exactly why, been able to do that. And I think this study will have you clean it out because you have to televise it, correct?
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's one way of also getting them cleaned out. The areas that flooded so bad, too, was off of E-Course, Parkwood, and then we have our continual Duncan Street, I call it frequent flyer areas that happens, even if it's not a big storm, it happens. Hayes is another one. So Jeff Street, Chevrolet, I mean, like Apple Ridge, but you put in a new structure there, and that seems to have helped.
Yeah, Apple Ridge is a good success story. So it was doorstep to doorstep in the 2021 flood. We were looking around for years, really since I've started this job, I've thought, I go to Florida and they get much harder rains, every day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon all summer. It just is, it rains really, really hard, big fat drops. It's a lot of rain in a short period of time. They have a different type of rain than us, in fact. The engineers, there's different types of rain. There's 5 different types and how intense and how hard they hit you and whatnot. The point is, down in Florida and on some of the East Coast and some of the West Coast, they have much larger, what I call openings in the curb. It might be 3 feet long. They don't get clogged up with a bunch of of debris. And of course, in Florida, right, you've got debris coming at you constantly because your growing season is like 14 months a year down there or something. So we did these in Apple Ridge. It wasn't exactly like the detail there. You know, we were actually working on structures that we had to get a thumbs up from the road commission on because they're in the roadway. They realized there's state standards in other states. And, you know, I think more and more of those are going to be helpful over time, partly because a lot of the nuisance flooding, not due to this, but a lot of this happens all the time, is just about, even if the street just got swept yesterday, if you notice when it rains hard, a lot of stuff comes off the landscape, but it also gets knocked off the trees. If, you know, I'm a geek, so when I look at what's on the structure, I'm like, where did that come from? Why is it there? And of course, the neighbors are like, would you just get it off, please? So the point is, no, there wasn't any street flooding that we've heard of in Apple Ridge. And when I went out there after the fact, I didn't see what I would expect to see if a street had been flooded for a while. Usually you'll see a ring of debris, you know, however many feet from the, you know, the hole where the water goes down. You know, whatever floated will float to the farthest perimeter of where it flooded. So I didn't see that on Apple Ridge. And I mean, where Apple Ridge is at, it's hard for me to picture that it didn't get hit pretty hard too.
Right,
Yeah, so really trying to try new and different things, and that could be part of some recommendations too. Maybe if the streets do end up getting torn up, I'd really recommend, you know, anywhere the streets are torn up, you know, looking at would it make sense to have some of these bigger curb openings and have something different that isn't so easy to get clogged up. I mean, there's reasons why in Michigan we've got the standard we have, but as I talk to more and more people, it's the main reason is, well, because that's how we always do it. And that maybe isn't the best reason to do anything.
So I
Anything else?
greatly appreciate,
Yep.
you know, what you're doing and what you've done for residents. You come right out and your team does, and they'll clean it and address it.
Yep,
If they can, they will.
I'm fortunate to have a good group of people. When I walked down the hall last week, you know, we kind of started getting wet Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday weren't fun days. You know, I think I got the dogs out for a walk for a little bit in the Gap Saturday, but the guys were like, yeah, we're out cleaning off the gratings in Ypsi Township. We have a standard set of areas, and quite a few of them are here in the township. A lot of them are actually in that buyer relief area where they come out and clear off the structures. But you just heard me say, even if we do that, and even if it all gets shoveled in a truck, there's just more debris that comes. When it rains really hard, it'll knock off some pretty good-sized twigs off of the trees, and that's the beginning of the problems. So I would say, too, I'd like to thank Treasurer Eldridge, because when I actually got out and talked to the Duncan resident, I talked to two fellows who live pretty close to each other. I never knew their problem isn't that Duncan Street backs up and fills up. Their problem is they start getting water from Hawthorne that comes across backyards to their house. And it's significant for us to understand stuff like that with residents. You know, yes, the pipes are probably a little small out there for when it rains, but that's not the first impact that they're seeing. So we have to know from people, if that's what's happening, that might affect what we recommend. Maybe we need to do more over on Hawthorne Street, or maybe it's just the fact that's the lay of the land, and you know there's not much to do, and so unless somebody wants to give an easement to get to the rear yard, you know, something like that.
Right.
So it's really important to get the direct resident
They had a
input.
video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
couldn't believe the amount of water that was gushing
Yeah.
in the backyards and coming. I mean, it was going over a street and
Yeah.
down the
Yeah.
other driveway.
Yeah, so it's definitely tough, and we're happy to be able to have an opportunity to help out. So if you folks are ready to spend more time on this in the future, let me know. I'm happy to come back and ask more questions. Otherwise, just let us know when it's thumbs up time for these two proposals.
What we do have on the agenda is the use of the surplus drain
Yes, for the main
funds
meeting, yep.
for the green infrastructure for stormwater management as well.
Yep.
So that other resolution will be on the next agenda.
Yep. Sounds good. You good? Yep, thank you. All set?
Thank you. We have the agenda to review, and I see that Judge Washington is here. Did you want to address or just listen or introduce?
For the contract, but, wow, here. I think think the board should meet, our new magistrate, and I guess we should say the outgoings to our previous magistrate might be a good time to just do that briefly. If that's okay with you.
Can you go to the microphone just so we can hear and welcome to the new magistrate? Oh, she can go, or
Over there in the
is it on?
Let her introduce herself.
Appears to be. So my name is Hillary Braley, and yes, I'm going to be the new magistrate. I just started this week. So
Well, welcome.
thank you.
And when is,
What your experience is and where you came
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'm originally from Pennsylvania. Went to law school at Wayne State out here once I moved out here in from 2015 to 2018. I was practicing some elder law in Monroe right after I graduated, and just recently came from the United Community Housing Coalition doing tenant defense in Detroit during the Sarah era. So that was quite interesting. And now I'm here. So
Well, welcome.
thank you.
All right, good afternoon, members of the board. So I did just want to say to Mark, my magistrate, and say it publicly how much I have appreciated all that you've done for the 14B District Court, and your service is truly going to be missed. I will miss you, and I am glad that we had this opportunity. It's been a journey from start to finish, and it is my honor to have had you serve with me and me serve with you. All right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mark, you have any, when is your last day exactly?
Friday.
This Friday?
Yeah. So I'll be bringing Hillary around to meet the elected officials here in the next couple of days. And we'll send out an email to the other board members with her contact information, things of that nature, so everybody has an opportunity to at least know how to reach her if you need anything from her. And we'll get those introductions done. But yeah, unfortunately, not a lot of overlap time, but we're cramming as much as we can in this week to get her up to speed. And of course, I'm not going far. I'm just re-entering private practice, so I'll continue to make myself available to the court as needed as we go along this. But she's going to pick up things really quick. I'm confident of that, and you guys will forget about me in a few weeks.
I too want to thank you, Mark, for your service to the township and to the court. And we have been through a lot. 15 years, or you've been here, so it's been a lot. But wish you and your family the very best, and thank you for your service.
I appreciate that. Thank you. This has been nothing but a pleasure to work here and to move the court forward, both under Judge Pope and Judge Washington. It's been quite an experience for me, and I've learned a lot. We've accomplished a lot, and I think we're leaving things in good hands with the team you're going to have moving forward. So thank you very much.
And I remember asking Mark, Hillary, I said, does she have experience? She said, not in a magistrate, but neither did I. So, and then I thought, well, none of us had experience being elected or, in different positions before, so welcome.
Thank you. And I am very aware that I have large shoes to fill. So.
All right. At this time, then we're going to go to the agenda. I see there is a resolution for the payment of the surplus drain fund that's on here, and John Hines has OHM for construction engineering for the Ridge Road Sidewalk project in the amount of $69,000. Yeah, or, what?
Good evening, Matt Parks with OHM. In your packet, you have a proposal from us. This was a project that we bid a little while ago, and later in the agenda, there's an award to Doan. Back in September, we opened up bids. Doan, who actually did a couple of recent projects for the township, was the low bidder. We bid this in a way that gave them the option to either bid it in the fall or spring for the same price, and they chose the spring because they were very, very busy. And we said, great. And so now we're before you tonight so we can, get our CE services to oversee Doan, inspect, do material testing, do all the things that the Road Commission want done. And then the first task in there, it also includes some rework of what was bid for a bus stop along Clark. There's some ridership questions, and I've been in contact with Yucca, the people over at the service center. We might shift the bus stop a little further to the west, away from that single-family house on, if you can picture Ridge and Clark, there's a single-family house on the southwest corner. We're going to probably put the bus stop just west of that. We already have one designed on the north side, but the ridership numbers, and I've been working with Clerk Rowe on that. We're going to get that kind of refigured and back to Doan. It shouldn't really change cost too much. I do have a contingency in the Doan contract to account for a little bit of additional sidewalk. That's probably going to be necessary to do that. But this is our standard OHM level of service, inspection, contract administration, construction engineering, staking, and working with the road commission on the permits. So look forward to getting this one going. We probably won't kick this off until after frost laws are off. So I would expect like a late April, early May bid. Supervisor Stumbo, you've worked with DTE to get the corridor lit. Yucca's done a great job trimming all the trees back from the fence line. Part of this project is to repair some of the pieces of fence that are got beat up from tree branches, and Yucca took care of a lot of the tree removal and branch removal, which we actually included some of that in our contract, so there should be some savings from that. So overall, this is a much needed project, and looking forward to getting it going in the spring.
Questions or comments? The sidewalk project goes from the township line
Yeah, sorry.
all the way south.
All the way to the north border. So from
Michigan.
Michigan, well, basically Holmes Road along the west side, and then it actually replaces the existing sidewalk north of Clark up to the township's limit. I think Mott Road is the limit. A lot of that sidewalk through there, it's walkable, but it's only 4 foot, and it's beat up in some areas, so this brings it all back into ADA compliance. So
Yeah, so we already bid this out.
it's already bid,
You
and
mentioned bid. Okay.
Doan's ready to go, and you'll, under authorization and bids, there's another item.
Yeah.
I probably don't have to get up and talk about that, but Doan's a contractor Township has used many, many times. Most recently, they just completed the concrete work at Ypsi Township Fire Station number 3 on Hewitt Road.
So we want to be the first ones for Doan? Like, when did you give them a start date?
The start date, I think I gave them a range of, I think they have 10 weeks to complete the job, and we're probably going to start around on or about April 15th. Once we execute contracts, which I'll forward to Mr. Winters to review once they're partially executed, those will have the exact dates outlined in the contract.
So AAATA will pay for the engineering for their,
We already designed it. Honestly, there's a little bit of work just to flip the design onto the south side and connect the dots. I probably have to get with Yucca to make sure where we put it is good with them. But I included, whether or not AAATA's, I don't know if they're paying for anything or not, but we have a little bit of effort in this proposal to just do that work. The effort's probably plus or minus $5,000 to do that actual sit down with them, talk to them, make sure it's good, make sure you want it on the south side. But that's included in this proposal.
yeah, but I do think AAATA will do the engineering for that. That was my understanding, as long as we had a sidewalk.
Yep.
that,
And this, just so everybody's clear too, this is very similar to the pad we put along here on River Drive. We've done one here on Vets Drive. We're putting the pad in place. AATA will need to come back and put a shelter if so desired. So that's part of the discussion we have to have with them. But the pad is sized.
Have you talked to AAATA?
We have at the beginning, but we have not about moving it further to the west. We had talked to them about putting one on the north side of Clark Road, but based on my conversations with the clerk, ridership going, what would that be, westbound, isn't as great as the ridership eastbound. So right now, it's perfectly fine designed to have a bus shelter on the north side of Clark Road near the intersection, but the desire is that the shelter should go on the south side for the other direction. And I haven't been involved in any of those conversations. So that's something that needs to happen, and that's the main reason why we're bringing this CE proposal to you now, is so we can work on that this winter before construction starts.
With Doan, do you have to be 5 weeks full-time? With, or,
Per the road commission, they want full-time inspection on it. Yeah, I would, and there's a lot of residence yards we're gonna be in. So, yeah.
I don't think a lot of residents, you mean replacing the existing maybe?
North of Clark. I mean, we're going to be basically maybe making sure where we cross their driveways, we're going to have to hand out notices, make sure they're not driving over it. Those residents will have to park in their approach for 8 days, maybe a week and a half, before they can go across it. So just monitoring all that. It's all concrete, just making sure that whatever you guys spend your money on is built to last. But Doan always exceeds expectations in terms of timing. And this is a pretty simple job for them. So we're hopeful that we will be with.
We just want to make sure we're not last on the list. So I heard you say, and the record will reflect.
No, you're first on the
30
list. You're first on the list for 2024.
Okay, good. Excellent.
So Matt, could you explain a little more about how the bus, like just a little more about how that decision was made? Because if I'm understanding the location right, we're talking about the park is on the north side. So we're going to move the bus on the other side, which really is like the Yucca property for.
That's where it's currently at.
Not the Yucca property, the
Yucca.
well, is it, and the compost site, right? And then the house, it's really only thing that's over on that
So
side, right?
the existing bus stop's really close to the intersection. There's like a little bit of dirt and gravel with no curb and gutter, a sign, a bench, and a garbage can there. We were going to improve that intersection and put the bus station right there. However, with the pad and the way AATA likes to put their pads, we're going to significantly encroach into that single-family home that's there. And we could keep it all within the right-of-way, but those pine trees that really block them from that intersection and all that traffic, we're going to be significantly impacted. So when we looked, we're like, at first the discussion was, well, there's a bus stop across the street as well. People could use the shelter on the north side. We have all the room in the world, right? It's township-owned property. They could use that shelter if they see the bus approaching, they could cross or whatever, but we didn't really have the conversation that the clerk did with AATA about the ridership level. So we thought improving the north side, we're slightly improving the south side with just a concrete pad, and it'll be nicer than it is today, but not enough room for a shelter. We'd put a shelter on the north side. After talking to the clerk and information she received from AATA, the shelter really needs to go on the south side. So the solution to that would be just moving it very slightly west, just to the west side of that property, which is basically in front of Yucca's gate off of Clark Road, that north access that really that's not their primary entrance and exit. There's room there, plenty of room there to put it. So that way, it's still very close to the intersection. For all intents and purposes, it's basically picking people up in the same spot, but it's not going to impact that single-family home. That would make a pretty drastic impact to them. So we're avoiding that. And like I said, we already have it designed on the north, so all we have to do is mirror it on the south side, do a little bit of grading. I need to meet with Luke's guys over there, which I've already been meeting with, because we're impacting their driveway off of Ridge Road during this construction too, and coordinate that, so.
So you're saying that more people get on the bus on the south side versus.
That's what I was told by Heather, yes. And before we do any work, we're going to sit down and have a meeting.
Well, AAATA, that did qualify for shelter, and AAATA will pay for that bus shelter, unlike the one on Huron Street, Huron River Drive.
Right.
But they will pay for it if it met a certain threshold for ridership.
I was wondering where are people coming from, because there's nothing along that side right there. I get the
They're coming from,
North side because the neighborhood's there, but on the other side, you've got a single-family house, you've got, I mean, there's literally nothing.
it's where the
on
bus
that
goes.
side.
The,
Right.
the bus goes out that way and takes people.
So people have to be crossing the street though.
Yeah, they are, and,
Because there's,
yeah, they have,
there's not, so it just, I don't know, it's just.
There'll be an improved crossing of Clark right at the intersection, so ADA compliant ramps, striping. Right now, there's sort of kind of a crossing, but there's not any ADA access or any real crossing across Clark at that intersection. So that's a huge improvement to this overall project and just making it safer for people.
Yeah, I would just want more information about that. It's not making sense to me. Of course, I'm not.
I'd be happy to email you all of those details,
But
yep.
it just seems like whoever's getting on the bus, they're getting on the bus and they're coming home on the bus too. And the largest population of people that walk to a bus stop is going to be on the north side. It's not going to be on the south side because they're going into the neighborhood. And other than that, you've got a single family home, and you've got municipal facilities, and you got a school. And then the next time you're talking about a neighborhood, it's
Yeah.
way up there, like Pasadena and those streets, so.
yeah, everyone's,
I mean, I don't know, I can't say it, but it just seems like they're coming and going one, I mean, if you get on the bus, you usually come home on the bus, would be my guess, and so I just would want to know more about that. Not now. That's the only thing that's not making sense.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I know exactly how to approach it. We've had many meetings with AATA before. We're going to have one shelter is in the bid with a pad, and then one improved bus stop. So whether we got it right or we end up flipping it, we can handle that as part of the scope. So, and if we don't need to change anything and we got it right, then there's that much more money we won't spend because it's an hourly not to exceed contract. So.
all right, thank you. And I forgot that I skipped the request to accept a grant from the state of Michigan for $5 million for security renovations at 14B District Court. And then we needed to add to the agenda under other business that was, if it's okay with the board. It says step 2 of the architectural and engineering professional services for James Renaud of JFR. So now that we have the grant, we can actually proceed with the rest.
Yeah, this is essentially an extension of our conversation from our last board meeting. Perhaps the next day, if not 2 days later, we got the grant contract from the state of Michigan, which was the piece we didn't have when we presented last time to the board. So this is, gives us the ability to accept that grant money and proceed with the project by funding from the legislative funds that Representative Wilson got for us.
There's a couple things that need to be changed, and I know Mr. Winters, you were able to review it.
Yeah, I reviewed it, yes, I did, and I think that probably with Mark leaving, it probably should be,
Stan?
sorry?
Stan? Or-
Yeah, I think,
For Mark,
in regards to being a grantee, I suppose it should be someone who's going to be responsible to oversee the project, so I think Stan's been the most involved on the township side for the renovations.
Since Mark's leaving.
We could, yeah, I mean, I can send an email off and see which, if they want that up, somebody from the court or somebody from the township on that, yeah, by all means, take my name off of it, that's fine.
Well, we have to.
I don't want to be
because you're
responsible
not-
for it, yeah.
Well,
no.
you're not going to be here.
Yeah, exactly, so.
Unless you want to do it from afar.
No,
but-
no. So I'll send an email tomorrow, see if they have a preference or a requirement as to which side of the building they want that name to be from. If it's from us, it'll be Court Administrator Magistrate Braley will be added on to that. If it's okay for them to do the township side, we'll have Stan added on, but I'll find out.
Well, it's the grant, we're the grantee, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And
I think there's,
it's just someone to work with the architect to make sure the bills are paid.
yep.
And, right, and the grant documents are sent to the state of Michigan. And
Yeah, so whatever they need or whatever they wanted to have, how they want to have it done, we'll get it done that way. That's fine. That's an easy one.
Are there other direction, or do we need to send them, because you're not going to be here, do we need to send them a email?
I think Mark was indicating that he was going to notify the grant administrator that he's leaving, and there should be someone who's going to be here to oversee the grant as the grantee. I had just mentioned Stan because I knew that Stan had been involved in this
Right.
project
Yeah.
from the beginning. I think under the other business, after we had the internal meeting a week or so ago, I did talk to JFR Architects, and he did provide a proposal for professional services that needs to be approved by the board this evening. This is during the last meeting, I think he estimated his cost to be $200,000. This proposal is more specific in that it's going to be in the neighborhood of, well, it's $223,564. So I would recommend that this be approved the same evening that you're accepting the grant. There is another document that we had, Mark sent a copy that night, and I saw another copy today, where there are a number of key points or conditions as to how the dollars are going to be allocated for this project. I do know that, from what I can tell, $2.5 million is going to be released initially, from my understanding. And then once that $2.5 million has been properly spent and accounted for, that would then release the remaining $2.5 million with the final documents to be, approved by the state in accordance with the terms of the grant. In talking with JFR architect Renat, he did indicate, I did ask the question that this specific project for 223, that this is in addition to the one project that he was authorized to perform last year by this board to do improvements to this boardroom and the counters up there to achieve ADA compliance and other upgrades. He did indicate, he did state that it was his intention to actually have this portion of the improvements in the 14B court improvements to be put out for bid simultaneously, and that he would have the ability, the software, what have you, to ensure that there was a segregation of dollars. In other words, that the dollars that would be expended for improvements to the Civic Center boardroom and the Civic Center counters would be separate, of course, from the dollars that would be expended for the 14B court. But I think he was optimistic in hoping that you would have maybe one contractor that could be able to do the improvements for both the 14B court and the township side. I just brought that up because at the time of the meeting, I was still unclear as to where we stood in regards to the improvements to this boardroom and the counters. So he did clarify that. That's what I put in my letter to the board and to the court, that he was going to bundle, my word, bundle the documents in the hopes that he'll get one contractor that can do both functions, but keep the accounting separate. So that's just a point of information. The documents to be approved tonight would be the acceptance of the grant with understanding that it references to our former magistrate to be, Mark Nelson, be replaced by whoever is designated by the state or this board to be the grantee, be it Treasurer Stan Eldridge or maybe another person as well in conjunction. This be signed by Supervisor Stumbo and Clerk Rowe. And then under other business, you're going to be asked to approve, I think, a scope of work, because his design work cannot really commence until this grant has been formally accepted by the township, approved by the state, and then he can then proceed with his work, which I'm assuming won't be until sometime, I believe, in January. If I'm mistaken on that, someone can correct me, but that's my understanding as to what the timeline was going to be. But the good news, it appears that the grant is before the board this evening on December 5th, and that this can be return to Lansing yet this week.
I didn't see anywhere in the agreement they were going to get 2.5 million up front. So it says we'll submit
That's,
payments for,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah.
That was in the explanation documents that came with the original application. They explained how they were allocating out the funding. That came from Representative Wilson's office probably a month or so ago. That's a set of documents that were forwarded to you. And that's the one that has sort of some arrows going down through showing each step of the way of how it works. So that's where that piece of information comes from.
It's just not in the agreement, that's all. But, you know,
I think
I trust, no, I don't.
there is a separate document that I would prefer to also be part of this board, this package. It may not be one that has to be signed, but it is one that explains how the dollars are to be expended. And I did get a copy of that, I think, during the board meeting 2 weeks ago. I think it was sent out, and then I got another copy, same copy today from you, Mark. And so I think that would be appropriate for that to be included in the acceptance of the grant, because it does tell you how you're going to get the money and what you have to do to make sure you get the remainder. So this document here does not go into that kind of detail beyond the $5 million grant, but the other document that gives you the procurement policies of the state of Michigan, reimbursement policies, that is a standalone document, I believe, that from what I've seen, that probably should at least be recognized and be part of the approval process. So it's, I think for accounting purposes and for Director Neal's purposes, it would be helpful to actually have all that as one approved package, one approved document.
And if you'd like, when I email asking about whom they want named on there, I can get that piece clarified too, if that needs to be.
Well, I mean, we just, if they said it and it's written somewhere else, we'll just include it, right?
I would assume so. I mean, I don't know if you want that. Is that referenced in the contract? But, you know, is that other document referenced in the contract by reference, or did you want it specifically laid out?
I think it was somewhat of a standalone document, but yet
It
it
is,
was
yeah.
also one that related back to the grant itself. And just for clarity's sake, I would just include that as part of the grant agreement. Although they may not interpret it that way, I think that for a comfort level, at the board level, it'd be a good reminder as to what has to be done with the initial 2.5 million, how you get reimbursed in order to proceed to the second phase. Again, I think Architect Renata is going to be preparing, his scope of work is going to include somewhere, I believe, $3.8 million worth of design work, et cetera. So I do believe it's important to actually have everything in one file folder, so to speak, in regards to what you're doing, especially as you track those costs, which is going to be independent from the costs you're going to be tracking for improvements to the boardroom and the I keep saying the Civic Center counters, because that's how he described it at the time, to make the counters more ADA compliant, as well as as you come down these steps, you can just see at times the awkwardness of these steps down here, and they're not really sorry? Even for someone, I mean, for me, it's hard to judge sometimes. It'll take one step, take two steps. But at the same time, I think that was part of his initial contract. He's going to combine in the bidding process for the 14B court.
All right, well, I'm glad we have the grant. That's good news. We'll add that. Stan, if you could print it out, we can put it in the packet and add it for Lisa and any other questions or comments on, this is accepting the grant? And then is it all right under other business to add step 2 for the architectural and engineering professional services for the renovation of 14B? It's a circuit court, it's district court. Is it all right with everyone to add this? No, if everyone agrees to add it, then no objections, I guess. All right.
So am I hearing Attorney Winters say, as far as the acceptance of the grant, that it sounds like there are things that you want all in a folder. Is there anything that we need to add to the resolution when we accept the grant tonight, based on what you just said about the things that need to be there?
I think as long as you identify that document the grant includes as an attachment, and they have 3 exhibits to the grant,
Okay.
and as long as we include as another attachment, it's actually the state of Michigan's own document
Right.
as to how they are going to go about allocating the funds, but for the standpoint of the accounting department, for the benefit of someone like Stan who's going to be overseeing it, it's a good checklist of what you have to do in order to remain in compliance with the terms of the grant. So that should be, in my opinion, included in the acceptance of the grant. That second document, I don't have it in front of me because
Right.
I was,
But we need to add that tonight?
I would,
or
I
With the motion and the approval?
Yeah, Stan's going to print out a copy and distribute
Okay.
it, and then we're
Okay.
going to put it in as part of the packet, just to include it, just,
Okay, no, I'm fine with that.
yeah,
Just wanted to clarify if we needed to add.
yeah, we do, yeah.
So this professional services contract is separate or part of the grant? Separate? Okay.
I'm sorry, we need to add it under other business. Now that we have the grant, then we go to step 2 of the professional services agreement.
Okay. All right.
just for clarification, it may not have been as articulate as I would like it to be, but JFR is the architectural firm that was selected several years ago to do an initial overview of what had to be done for both the 14B court and the Township Civic Center. They received, I think, $26,000 for that initial overview. Then after that, he received a contract for $119,000 for improvements to this boardroom and the Civic Center counters. And this document here, the 223, is for his professional services under that master contract, so to speak, to perform architectural engineering services for the 14B court. So right now, he has 2 contracts. And that's why he was indicating to me that he was going to have all the bidding documents prepared, let out at the same time, and that while it remains to be seen if one contractor can do both 14B court and the township side, it was incumbent upon him to maintain the separateness of accounting, so just to ensure that what's being charged over here does not get charged to the court or vice versa. So that's why I think it was important to get this document in written form tonight, because at the last board meeting, he just orally stated that he was estimating his cost to be around $200,000. It's more than that, but it's in writing now, and so he now has a more of a precise, a precise number of 223,564. So that's going to be, again, attributed to the 14B side.
And reimbursable by the grant.
That portion would be, yeah.
And the Civic Center side is totally separate? Okay,
But it's kind of hanging out there, because we don't really have anything,
yeah.
like, that was the first of the approved as we move forward, but, it's great that we got a grant, but I feel like the civic center stuff, I don't know, other than the groups. Can you use your mic? I'm sorry, I don't know what, like, we approved that work before this, so I feel like this got maybe put ahead of it because we got the grant, but that civic center stuff that we approved, like, we've had no update, like, I don't know where we're going, so I don't know even if he was gonna do some work for that, like, what exactly is that? Like, what's the 119? I don't think we've had an update on that particular part since we as a board agreed to do that. And I don't know how that's gonna happen. I don't think that's necessarily gonna come from court staff, because it's gonna have to come from something here, unless I'm misunderstanding something, which could be. Started out as like a work that was putting projects together, and now we have money to move forward on the court part. And even though we did approve moving forward on some civic center work, but that hasn't really moved forward. Are we waiting on something else for that part?
All I know is back in February, when I requested a status update, I think he did advise in a timeline that was sent over here recently that after February of 2023, he kind of focused on the 14B side because of the ability or the availability or potentiality of obtaining the $5 million grant. And so now that that's now been before as part of you this evening, he did say, not in writing, he just said, I confirmed in my letter to him that I sent out, I did confirm that he said that he was going to get the bidding documents for the township side, and those would be bidded simultaneously with the 14B court renovations. So you got the same architect working on a set of plans that to some degree there's going to be probably some synergy, some compatibility, and some interconnection, I suppose, but they are two separate projects, and they need to be treated that way for accounting purposes, but for overall engineering, management, et cetera, I have to leave that to him and to Treasurer Eldridge and other people that are going to be overseeing the project. But just from a legal standpoint, we have two separate contracts, two separate functions that are going to come together as one.
All right.
Mark, if I say anything wrong, you just jump in here. I'm trying to play catch up myself.
Yeah, I mean, and part of the issue here, of course, goes back to Mike Hoffmeister was heading this project originally. I do recall that there are conceptual drawings for the township side, the boardroom, the counters, and things like that. So I mean, I think they're almost at the same stage. We had to do some catch up on the court side. But there are drawings that were produced for the Civic Center side when Mike Hoffmeister was here. So I'd leave it back to the architect to circle back to him for sure. But I think they're pretty close as far as being ready to launch from the same point.
All right, thank you. We also have under the budget amendment, creating the revenue and expenditure. And we would need to amend the proposed 2024 budget to include that. Just to have our 2024 budget to have now that we have the grant and we know it's coming. We're trying just to get it all in order so we can process it smoothly with the state of Michigan. Because what I tell you, Mark, I'm not going to jail for anybody.
No,
we're going to make sure it's going to be in order. They take grant monies very, very serious,
Yep.
And they should.
Yep, absolutely.
But there's a lot of reporting that has to occur. So.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I'm glad that we got it and appreciate all the efforts that are being done to help with the safety and security in 14B District Court.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I wanted to thank everybody on the board and particularly Stan and Heather were helpful. Attorney Winters has been involved in the meetings. Brenda's been involved, a few of them. And it's been over a year coming to get this all pulled together. Like I said, it started when Mike Hoffmeister was here. He left about a year ago, so we've been working for a long time on this. And it's been I'm very glad to be in a position right now where I'm leaving and handing this off, and it's going to be a finished project. So I'm excited to see this go along as I sort of drive by on my daily commute to see progress go on this. So I appreciate everything that the board's done to get this moving forward.
All right. Any other questions? And then I also did not talk about the resolution for the fiscal year budget. This is going to be a public hearing, and some of the changes that I was able to review since our last meeting, which was making sure that we budget for the public safety grant from the state of Michigan for $5 million and creating that revenue and that expenditure. And then the community engagement, adding a temporary seasonal. It's actually an intern. We used to have them in the planning department, and a social worker can get their hours by being an intern with the community engagement under Lori, who is the head of the community engagement. And the intern is from EMU. And for $6,000, we can actually budget for and have an intern that will help with a lot of the initiatives at the Community Network Center. We used to have an intern in planning almost every year from EMU and ended up actually hiring people. So they need to do an internship somewhere as part of their bachelor's degree, and sometimes it's not paid at all, but we didn't think that was fair. So it's $15 an hour. They only work 16 hours a week. So I would, if it's okay with the board, if we could add that to the Community Engagement Fund. And then previously in the draft budget, I took out the GCSI lobbyists since Kirk Prophet is retiring. But the last agreement we signed was a 3-year agreement. It used to be a yearly agreement that we had, and the last agreement was a 3-year agreement, and it doesn't end until 2024. So I need to re-budget for GCSI. Some of the things I was thinking about them working on was actually the yucca bonding. For some reason, in the state of Michigan, Ypsilanti Township did not get any of the funding from all the billions of dollars that was available. We did get $10 million from the federal for the odor control replacement, I think it was. Did we find this round? So I know we've submitted a lot, and if we can get some relief for loan forgiveness or, and Luke is shaking his head because we've asked and some reason I don't understand it, but we don't qualify. But having someone focus on getting federal and state grants, and that would help relieve the actual cost of the ratepayer, which would help to housing affordability, and it will have a positive impact, just like the $42 million for the relief for the Willow Run debt. That will help our taxpayers, which just helps with affordability. So our lobbyist, Kirk Prophet, worked very hard on that. But I didn't realize when I went to notify them that, we no longer, we'd like to contract maybe for their services on issues as we need them. They told us that there was a 3-year agreement. I have to rebudget.
Chair,
Yes.
is it the 1st of January, or did they give a specific date?
It ends,
Do you know?
it has one more year of 2024.
One more year?
Yeah.
Oh, so it ends at the end of 2024?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So therefore, Kirk's leaving. Are they going to appoint, or we're going to
Well, we're gonna-
designate another
yeah, we're gonna-
lobbyist to work in that company, or what's the plan?
Yeah, we're going to have to meet with them and, find out.
Got it.
And we'll notify them this year that we're not going to renew for next year. And
Yeah, but
I wish we could just contract for if there's a specific issue that we need lobbying for, instead of,
paying-
retaining it, because right now, well, not,
But eventually, it's going to be worked out with the company, because we're already paying for it
yeah,
to the end of 20.
yeah. And it would be helpful if we could get some help. I don't understand why we don't qualify for the past funding. So to have a lobbyist really get on that and work on behalf of the ratepayers of YCUA, I think it would be helpful. So that was my mistake. I apologize, but that did happen.
Did they share they're clear about their contract. Did they share who our new person's going to be once Kirk is finished?
Not yet.
So we're going to have a contract, we have 1 year left, and so we're terminating that last year. We can't. So, okay, so then our new contract will be from 25 to 28?
We don't, we're not going to, well, we could We can cross that bridge when we get
Okay.
to it, yeah.
All right. Oh, so after this last year?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I have a document to. So are there questions? It's a public hearing, so we'll accept any input on it. We're not going to vote on the actual resolution. We've been through it at length. Is there any other questions on the proposed budget?
I don't know if this is appropriate. I didn't catch what,
Could you go to the microphone and give your name and
I didn't catch what contract was just referenced that is being
there was a
canceled?
3-year contract for GCSI, which are our lobbyist company. So we contract with them. We used to have yearly contracts, and the last contract we approved was for 3 years.
Okay,
And
what do they do?
they lobby for us for different community issues. One of them in particular this year that they were very.
So at the state level, federal level,
They can do all, yeah.
represent you?
They
Okay.
can, yeah, they can
Thank
do
you.
all. Heather just arrived and distributed something. You want me to?
Yeah, Madam Chair, apologize for my tardiness. What I sent, or gave you guys, John Hines sent just a little bit ago, and it's part of the community center package, and I don't know that you guys have discussed that yet. And he was thinking that Stan Tech may bring some copies, but I just wanted to at least give you all pictures. It is not the full document, because I didn't think it was a good use of paper, and I can't print them big enough. So what you have in front of you are just the drawings that we'll be discussing later. Did I give you one? Oh, this is yours, because I didn't want one. Sorry. That's for you. Doug got the color copy. You can trade them.
This has nothing to do with the pipe underneath because we only got one bidder for that and we didn't accept it.
I cannot answer that specific question about what my understanding is we did get that one bid, and this
Yep.
is sort of like the revised package. And in our email, everyone got an email tonight, and the actual bid document's about 74 pages long, and then the schematic drawings are like 15 pages, but they're really meant to be printed on, like a plotter. So that was just a quick information, so that when they present later, you guys have something in front of you that's the picture.
Okay.
And this will take care of the area of the sanitary sewer that had the belly in it and take it out west through the golf course, not on the land, of course, through a pipe, and to the sewer manhole connection and get it away from the building. So it is doing the part with the sanitary sewer, but it would still be in the cement or the structure of the building.
So this is already approved and they're coming to tell us about this, or?
On the agenda, it's to request authorization to seek sealed bid for the renovation of I had the wrong one, sorry, of the
So-
community center.
So we're not gonna repair what's underneath the building?
I think that someone from Stan Tech is coming to talk tonight in more detail about everything. And I don't know if, John, if you want to, but I think it might be more helpful if Jennifer's here and can answer questions.
Yeah, so Lindsay from Stantec is on the way, and she was going to kind of describe how they've revised it to be able to do the plumbing underneath the building, still do the sanitary line that goes out to the golf course, and it would affect the 200 and 300 hallways, as well as do the renovations for the 200 hallway and 300 hallway bathrooms, and the insurance reconstruction of the dance studio, room 201, and the golf office. Oh, perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
Sure, we can. Okay, great. All right, how you doing today?
Doing good.
All right, thanks for coming. If we're going to come with bigger set of plans, I'm not sure if we will official Heather handing out is okay.
I mean, if we could have a copy for this, please. Madam Chair, Debbie, if I could just, I saw in the actual bid document, that's a 74-page thing that, again, we all have copies of, but it just says in the brief description that this project consists of interior and exterior sanitary line improvements, finish updates, and renovation of several existing restrooms in the building, limited mechanical, plumbing, and electrical scope of work included, and that's indicated in the pictures. But they're small. Thank you.
So set your stuff down if you need. Okay, so I know it'll take a second to unwrap those. So after we rejected the initial bid from A.R. Brower, we talked about how to bring the scope to the budget that was allowed for the projects to still be able to fix the most pressing underlying needs of the building. And we do feel that this plan will address that. And that, again, is the damaged pipe underneath the 200 hallway, bringing the sanitary line from the 200 bathrooms to the golf course drain, from the 300 hallway bathrooms to the golf course drain, and then the bathroom renovations for both hallways, as well as the insurance renovations of 204, 201, and the golf office. In 202, excuse me, the senior room.
Questions or comments?
So what are we not addressing that we were told before that we needed to address?
I can
Yeah,
start on that. So basically, we were seeking to do a scope reduction in order to get it into the allowable budget here and now. A lot of times with construction projects, once you start touching one series or one element of something, you have to bring other elements into compliance. And one of the items in the previous package that we were looking to include was also the hot and cold water piping, as well as some water heater items as well. And that work is all above the ceiling. You have to take the ceiling down to do that. So all of the water piping elements have been removed, and we're now just connecting to the existing without improving that system, which is allowed under the alteration level 2. Basically, that scope is excluded now. So when we didn't touch the water system, we no longer have to touch the ceilings. We no longer have to touch the fire alarm because we're not touching the ceilings. So it was really seeking to bring that into budget and then reducing those scope items so that we could take them out and they could be addressed later if the township would wish to do so in the future.
What, phasing?
Phasing or different budgets, yeah. So, yeah, and we still feel that there are improvements that should eventually be done for the lifespan of the building, but it makes sense to break it down into something that's easy to fund right now and also easy to reduce the phasing as well. So now, because we're only working with certain elements of the building, we're also not shutting down the building as much for the repairs to be done. And then also it eliminates phasing, which is going to be more appealing to contractors because they don't have to basically reset up and take down and reset up and take down. So it eliminates some of the schedule duration as well.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, I just have a question. For the projects you're not going to do or put on delay, what's the detrimental effect or time frame that they absolutely would have to be repaired?
Your most immediate problem that you're having issues with is the failed sanitary line, so we are seeking to resolve that. The other ones, it's kind of like the roof on your house. You know, when it starts leaking is when you have a real big problem, but you know at a certain point that you do need to start saving and funding for that. So I would say for like the water issues, you're kind of at a point now where some of it's been repaired and some of it's been repaired, but you're planning on using the building for a long time, so eventually you would want to replace those things.
Right. Well, I'm saying for the items in the ceiling that are being put off, you know, it makes no sense to make repairs and then all of a sudden now we have to repair the repairs that were not done in the first place for budgetary purposes. I'm just wondering how long would we have, and I know it's only an estimate, before that would have to be addressed?
I mean, as you make improvements, I would address that. I don't know when they're gonna do that, other than we did make a recommendation that they should be replaced in full previously. But I'm not a complete fortune teller. Just from what we saw, it was in need of being replaced, and would propose that in the future when you can, that you can do those things.
As opposed to just doing it all around the same time.
Again, for some of the like budget items that you have going on, some of the reasons for closing down portions of the building while the work's being done, it is more complicated than just like shutting down a little section for a little while. And it related, again, specifically to piping, there's certain ways that you would want to do that in order to address the pressure going through the piping and stuff. So it does make sense to do it in a certain order with certain improvements as you go. So again, we tried to seek scope that would work with what you have now. And then when you change that, you know, move forward with making those other improvements too.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
We can ask, now we can apply for grants too.
Exactly what I was gonna say.
Since the preliminary engineering is done. Is that what you?
And I was going to say, we're going to work with John to make sure that we write out some other scope items related to the work. We already have what you need documented based on the investigation we have done to date, so we can work to parcel that out or break that out in the future as y'all want to move forward.
Great. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Go ahead. No, that's exactly what I was going to say. It probably gives us time, John, to get prepared, because we know what we need to do eventually. When you do the first scope, you already got it. I hope sometime in the spring of next year or something, we start looking at other grants to get that money. I think, of course, everybody would like to see it all done, but where do you get the funds from? And if the funds are out there, I think we should pursue it, and I think you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, and to add on to that, just to kind of, agree with what Lindsay said, is when we had the discussion to bring this forward, that was a very important part, is I know how stressed it was at the meeting we met earlier when we had the initial bid of getting everything done eventually. So when we had those discussions about changing what we were going to bring forward, it was stated multiple times that we were going to bring everything else back in different phases to be able to look for different funding opportunities, put it in the capital improvement plan, and not let it be something that isn't done, because the building does need it. But this is definitely the most pressing, and we'll get the building back to being usable by the residents.
That's not my concern, because I was one of the more difficult people at the meeting that night. I'm worried about the pipe underneath. I'm worried about being told that that's a problem, and then knowing it's a problem and not addressing it. The grant, that's true, but we could have applied grants for the whole project the other way too. So my concern is being told by people who went in and did the work and came and told us that the structure of the building and that problem underneath is something that we needed to repair. So when we went back or whatever, however this is coming back to us, I don't think that night, maybe I was just placated. I don't think that night I was told that we would come back with something that was going to help address that particular issue, which it sounds like we're not going to address, fixing it underneath. So that's concerning to me. I appreciate the work that's been done, but it's concerning to me to be told. And then when you guys are referring to the budget, can you tell me what budget, like what's that amount? Are we talking about the $700,000 that was given for ARPA?
So this does address the pipe that's busted underneath that room 200. That's the biggest thing that needs to be addressed, because that pipe has failed, it is cracked, it is, as in Kaz, who is not here right now, said, in disrepair. So yeah, this does address that, because that is the most important thing.
But it doesn't take it out of the scope of under the building.
May I?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Related to the sanitary approach, especially in the 202 area and on the site as well, it has the same scope as the original package for how we're connecting and replacing the existing lines and where we're replacing them. When we came here last time, we were talking about routing it around the building if we could in entirety. Again, it is best to have that line outside of the building if possible. However, the distances and our current existing conditions for where we needed to make those connections made it infeasible to route all the way around both wings on the north and south side. So we have still gone through at 2 pinch points, but it doesn't reuse the existing sanitary line. It's a new sanitary line for those.
And if there's a failure elsewhere under the building, we're still going to have the same problem because we didn't correct it when we know there's a problem.
The main issue that you're currently having is actually with the deterioration of the existing pipe and the material that it was made of when the building was constructed. And when the additions were made, it's going to be a new piping material to current materials. And again, also we've tried to do the best we can with aligning what makes sense for your scope and cost related to that new line work and replacing it so that you're not using the old line. So anywhere it was under the building, it's no longer being used because it's going to be all new piping, and we used the most efficient routes we could from a cost standpoint and from aligning the elevation points on the site to make the sanitary line work for the project.
So will there be material that's also deteriorating but isn't a problem at this point that's still under the building and being used?
I believe that is called to be capped and abandoned in place, the existing piping. If not, you have to basically go and tear out more of your floor finishes and area and include that in the area of construction if you want to remove that in full.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, nothing that's going to be under the building that was originally identified as a problem will be in use any longer if we do this project?
That's correct, yeah. The old stuff is being abandoned and the new is being installed.
And then what's the budget that we're referring to?
Sure, so the budget that we currently have set aside is the 737 minus engineering costs, and then the funds that were set aside for the insurance reimbursement, which is about, I believe, $200,000 right now. So with everything that they propose in their scope, at least the cost estimate should stay under that number.
We're going to, if we could, just adjourn to take a little, we have 7 minutes before the next meeting, and we can continue to ask questions on this item. So the time is 6:55, and we'll adjourn to 7.